Hi, I'm Linda Quinlan.
I'm Ann Charles.
I'm Keith Ghostland, and welcome to All Things LGBTQ. We are taping on Tuesday, September 20th. As always, All Things LGBTQ is produced at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land. And with that, Linda, welcome back from a 40th anniversary whirlwind tour of P-Town.
Yes.
Boy, was it fun.
Was it? Okay.
We had a great time.
Over dinner, we'll talk.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I'm going to start with New York and the Shiva University, which has abruptly suspended student club activity in the wake of a U.S. Supreme Court decision earlier this week. We will have more about that. And in Richmond, Virginia, Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's administration has rewritten Virginia's model policies for the treatment of transgender students, issuing guidance for school decisions that would roll back some accommodations and tighten parental requirements, notifications. So we'll have more about that. And if you love romantic comedies, this is the chance meeting. And of course, the against all odds happy endings. Comedian and actor Billy Eichner loves rom-coms.
I think it's Eichner.
Eichner? Mm-hmm. But he has one complaint. They never made one about a gay couple. We weren't in those movies at all. We weren't even the best friend at that point. We just were nowhere to be found. So he thinks it's time for a change. With director and co-writer Nicholas Stoller and producer Judd Apatow, no strangers to rom-coms themselves, have co-written and stars in what's being billed as the first gay romantic comedy ever released by a major film studio, and also the first feature to an all LGBTQ principal cast. So, okay.
What's it called, Bros?
Yeah. A Texas judge on Friday expanded her order in an ongoing lawsuit giving families of transgender youth more protections against state child abuse investigations. We'll have more about that.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. We'll have more about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
A black trans woman says her housing complex discriminated against her family and refused to respect her gender identity. Shayla Anderson and her husband have filed the lawsuit accusing the Grand Fountain apartment complex in Richmond, Texas, of discrimination. A.C.D. Morrison, a Two-Spirit member of the Lakota tribe, was shot to death August 21st in her hometown of Rapid City, South Dakota. She's one of 30 transgender and gender non-conforming or non-binary people reported to have died by violence in 2022. There are likely many more such deaths that go unreported or misreported. Initial news coverage misgendered Morrison, according to the Human Rights Campaign. Montana officials say they won't obey the judge's order to lift a ban on gender changes on birth certificates. State Judge Michael Moses Thursday issued an injunction blocking enforcement of a rule adopted last week by Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services to ban any gender marker change on birth certificates except to correct an error. The injunction would be in place while a court case proceeds against a 2001 law that made it harder to change the gender marker. And in the city of Oakland, California, they celebrated Amy Schneider Day Wednesday, honoring the top woman and the top transgender contestant ever on Jeopardy. So that Wednesday was Amy Schneider Day in Oakland. And it was declared by Mayor Libby Schaaf. So there you go on that one. That must have been fun. A court filing from 16 current and former employees of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, along with the Texas State Employees Union, says the agency is on the brink of collapse, following the state's decision to investigate gender-affirming care of minors as potential child abuse. The brief cites a string of departures within the agency since the directive was put in place in February, arguing remaining workers will be spread dangerously thin. So, and then we have one of our favorites, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, one of the most anti-LGBT members of Congress, wants to make it a crime to provide gender-affirming care to minors. Greene finally introduced a Protect Children's Innocent Act. I don't know how she can do anything. Isn't she kicked off of committees? And I don't know.
She is still a member of the House of Representatives. She does not have a committee assignment.
Have a committee.
She doesn't have a committee assignment.
So she can do a bill?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Which would make it Class C felony to provide any such care to a minor. Conviction would carry a prison sentence of 10 to 25 years and a fine of up to $250,000.
I think she and Lindsey Graham were twins separated at birth.
Angela Ross is making history in her Broadway debut as the first trans lead in a revival of the musical Chicago. I love Chicago. Which will premiere September 12th, from September to November. Ross will star as Roxy Hart in an 8-week limited engagement. Her first show will take place at Ambassador Theater in New York City, according to Playbill. Known for her breakthrough roles as Candy Ferocity in the groundbreaking Emmy-nominated series Pose.
Oh, I remember her.
And as Nurse Rita in American Horror Story, Ross will take on Roxy after Pamela Anderson performed as the same character in her own limited run earlier this year. So that should be good. And the Biden administration on Tuesday will hold a meeting with a group of more than a dozen bisexual activists. The meeting, which coincides with Bisexual Awareness Week, will take place at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in D.C. Can you imagine Trump having one of those? And let's see, and then Warren Potus, a D.C. area-based computer engineer who designed mainframe computer software for some of the nation's leading tech companies, including IBM and Unicell, and the co-founder of 1979 of D.C.'s then Gay and Lesbian Wilderness, an outdoor group called Adventuring, died on September 5th. He was 73. So I think, Anne, I'm going to do this one thing, and then we'll move on to you, and I will save the rest of the stories for the next segment. President Joe Biden on Friday met with Brittany Grainer's wife. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, in a statement, said the meeting took place at the White House. A poll report noted Biden met with Sheryl Greiner and Brittany Griner's agent, Lindsay Colas. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also participated in this meeting. So hopefully, there'll be some progress on that, and that they will get her the hell out of there. So on to you. What are your headlines?
Well, unfortunately, I only have Europe and Asia this evening. And I thought I'll just go through half of the stories and then do the other half, rather than doing headlines first, if that's agreeable with my co-host.
I was going to say the world is getting smaller by the day.
I know. There's something going on with my news sources. They're kind of drying up, so I'm having to hunt harder, but I will prevail. Let's start with one of our favorite vacation spots that we've never been to, but hope to, is Malta.
Yes.
Malta's Prime Minister promises free gender-affirming surgery as part of the sweeping LGBTQ rights reforms.
Nice.
His name is Robert Abela. He's promised reforms including free gender-affirming surgery. He attended the Malta's Pride event on 10th of September and shared the news there. He's committed to carrying out these reforms, he says. My presence yesterday, as well as that of the ministers and MPs, symbolizes the messages that while we've done a lot, more is yet to come. While we're proud of what we did, more needs to be done.
Well, we're on our way to Malta.
Well, in 2019, a little more about Malta. Malta was named Rainbow Europe's best European holiday destination for LGBTQ plus travelers, scoring an impressive 90% out of 100. Belgium scooped up the second place with 73%, and the UK scraped in the top 10 at 9th place with 62%. And I think the UK might be going down a little bit with their new
Anti-trans stuff and the new prime minister. Yeah.
And I overlooked a story that I may share at a later date about Liz Truss's cabinet. But you may recall last time we discussed Serbian Belgrade Pride. There were marches opposing it and opposing it, but now it has come out. It has come to pass on September 18th, despite right-wing protesters clashing with police. The Belgrade's first ever Europride was celebrated on Saturday, with marchers who hoped the event would mark a turning point in the conservative country's attitudes toward the gay and transgender community. Several thousand people marched through Belgrade to mark the end of Europride week, an event staged in a different European city each year, which I've talked about in the past. Clashes between religious and right-wing groups and the police marred the start of the march, but LGBTQ people at Europride said they hoped change was underway in Serbia, a deeply conservative country that outlaws same-sex marriages and adoption by gay couples. I think this pride can definitely change a lot, said a 19-year-old student who was speaking from the center of the march amid fluttering rainbow flags and the sound of whistles. We always stand for peace, and I think that this could change things for the better. If those in power would just listen to us. We've been fighting for basic rights for a long time, but we will not give up. Gay pride marches in Serbia have had a checkered history, with right-wing groups attempting to disrupt the first ever event in 2001 and then again in 2010. In recent weeks, tens of thousands of people, as I've reported in the last couple of weeks, have taken to the streets to protest Europride, leading the government to initially ban the march, but faced with calls by the European Union officials and human rights activists, the march went ahead. It allowed a shortened route. I'm very proud of what we managed to avoid, that we managed to avoid more serious incidences. Ana Brnabić, the Serbian lesbian prime minister, told reporters. So 60 people were arrested, some police were injured, but it could have been a lot worse. But let's stay in Serbia if we could, because I have a picture before you of two lesbians who have launched a landmark same-sex partnership case in Serbia. Their names are Jelena Drbovi and Sunica Kapanovic. And they are, Ms. Drbovi is 27 and Ms. Kapanovic is 29. They've launched a landmark bid Thursday to win legal recognition of same-sex marriages in Serbia, saying they wanted to step out and stand up for LGBTQ rights in the Balkans. It's the first such legal challenge to be filed in Serbia. They're both from the same town, Novi Sad. They tried to get a civil partnership in April at the registrar's office, but were told that only men and women can marry, and they were, of course, turned away. As not many same-sex couples in Serbia are willing to step out, we decided to stand for all of us and try to fight and aim to win, said Dubrovi, 27, who began dating 29-year-old Kapanovic 4 years ago and then proposed to her in 2016. We are not afraid. We're sick of hiding who we are because that is actually nothing bad. We just love each other. Now, background about Serbia, it legalized gay sex in 1994 and outlawed discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation in education and employment in 2010. However, many LGBTQ plus people are still afraid to come out for fear of losing jobs and homes. And all these demonstrations against Europride would confirm their fears, I'm afraid. It has its first openly lesbian prime minister, yet the head of the Orthodox Church has likened same-sex relations to incest. There's a lot of turmoil in Serbia. And Slovenia and Croatia, which are both in the European Union, have legalized same-sex partnerships, while Montenegro and its neighbor Bosnia and Herzegovina are still considering legalization. The Serbian couple is unlikely to win in their home courts, but the couple's lawyer says maybe it'll go to the European Court of Human Rights, so it might stand a chance. It'll be prolonged in any case. So good for them for stepping up.
Absolutely. Do you ever hear anything about Armenia?
Yes, it's coming up.
Oh, is it? Because I've heard, it's really a pretty homophobic place. But
yes, it's coming up in one of my stories.
All right.
But let's go to Turkey now, where more miserable stuff is happening. Thousands march in Turkey to demand a ban on LGBTQ plus groups. So this is maybe a little worse than Serbia at this point. An anti-LGBTQ group marched in Istanbul on Sunday demanding that LGBTQ plus associations be shuttered and activities be banned in the largest demonstration of its kind in Turkey. They dubbed the demonstration a big family gathering. They gathered more than 150,000 signatures to demand a new law from Turkey's parliament that would ban
This is awful news.
what they call LGBTQ plus propaganda.
Which seemed like Turkey was there for a while. Yeah.
And they're all like trying to get in the European Union,
Right.
Serbia and Turkey.
I was going to say, in the 80s, Turkey was the safe haven in the Middle East if you were LGBTQ+.
At least the city.
That's where you went to get sanctuary and also get support. So this is a
real
huge
bad
shift.
turnaround.
It's awful.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to Turkey still, though, but I guess not in the near future. In any event, at this demonstration, they showed clips from the Pride Parade and a public service announcement, which caused an outcry. Amnesty International's Turkey office said the public service announcements listing the event violated Turkey's equality and non-discrimination principles. On a better European note, 15 of 25 members of Liechtenstein's parliament support marriage equality. Now, if I may continue.
We have a few more minutes for you.
Okay, let me talk about LGBTQ plus Russians who are trying to find refuge abroad.
Anywhere.
Well, yeah. As you recall, in the past, I've reported on the designation of foreign agent that Russia has started using against LGBT organizations and peoples. It describes people the Russian state believes to be engaging in political activity with foreign support. It's further tightened its laws on Russia on this issue. I'm here because it's not safe to cover queer rights in Russia anymore, a 40-year-old Russian gay journalist living in Berlin said. He, like many LGBTQ Russians, including journalists, lawyers, and human rights activists, have fled Russia since Moscow launched the war in Ukraine on February 24th. The invasion was followed by a crackdown on civil freedoms at home. Several independent media outlets were closed, as I reported at the time. Now members of the lower chamber of the Russian parliament have proposed extending the 2013 ban on promoting non-traditional sexual relationships to adults as well as minors. And one thing I learned from this story that I think is of particular interest is the following. Since February 24th, more than 300,000 Russians have left the country, EU Foreign Policy Chief said on Monday, as he warned against controversial proposals by Kyiv and several EU states for a ban on Russian travelers entering the bloc. Many LGBTQ plus Russians have found shelter in visa-free countries such as Turkey, Armenia, and Georgia. Alexander Derek, a trans man, said he chose to leave Russia for fear of reprisals over his political activism against Putin. The 23-year-old biology student and his boyfriend are now in the Armenian capital, Yerevan, where they have helped set up a community center to support LGBTQ plus people fleeing Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. I am more free in Armenia, but it's far from perfect. And now more information about Armenia. Armenia ranks 47th in Europe for LGBTQ plus rights, according to the European Human Rights Group, directly behind Russia and one ahead of Turkey, while Georgia strikes 34th. It ranks 34th, higher than several European countries, including Lithuania, Romania, and Poland. So, it's terrible in Eastern Europe. Within the European Union, Lithuania has become the favored destination for many Russians since the war began, with more than 2,200 having applied for temporary residence permits in the first 6 months of 2022. But the Baltic region is also the epicenter of the EU-wide debate, and this is what I didn't really know about till doing this story, the EU-wide debate over denying tourist visas to Russians, with countries such as Estonia and neighboring Finland backing the move, which activists say could hurt potential LGBTQ plus asylum seekers.
Well, and it sounds like from what you're describing, our efforts to try and give direct support within Russia are actually going to be misplaced, because if they can track the money, it's going to put them at greater risk. We should be looking at what are the organizations in Lithuania, Armenia that are creating centers that can then outreach through other networks to try and get members of our community there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and Lithuania may be desired because it's a shorter distance to get across the border.
And then I read another story
Europe, yeah.
that about Ukrainians fleeing to Poland and landing through no fault of their own on LGBTQ-free zones, So it's just terrible. Okay. I can continue, but I think Linda wants me to move on.
Yes.
And she's not going to be subtle about it.
No.
And DeSanto sending his...
we won't even go there.
Know.
That's a dinner conversation.
I know.
So the trivia question. Out in the mountains, September 1996, on the front page was a photograph of a Vermont candidate standing next to their Harvard Law School classmate Barney Frank, talking about their re-election campaign. So, who was the candidate?
We got it right away.
She lies.
What was the office? And the hint, and it didn't even help, was that this candidate was already the first openly LGBTQ plus constitutional officer elected in the U.S. So stay tuned. So events, I understand Rainbow Umbrella, the women's discussion group, is coming back.
Yeah.
Same format.
Well,
You will be in touch with people and let them know.
Of course, and we're going to talk about restructuring, and we're meeting on September 28th at 5:30.
All right.
So email me if you want to join.
And I also understand that Rainbow Umbrella is sponsoring a poetry reading on October 21st.
Indeed.
Is that going to be at the Senior Center?
It is going to be at the
Okay.
Senior Center.
Who I see is sort of reaching out and supporting more and more LGBTQ plus specific activities.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I hope viewers enjoyed Sarah Lipton's interview conducted by Linda on a recent show.
So the Rainbow Umbrella Momentum Book Discussion Group.
Yep. We're reading
Detransition Baby
Baby.
by Tori Peters.
Okay, and anyone can participate
yes,
in
it's
the
on
book
Zoom,
discussion.
If you're
so
interested,
people can-
yeah.
Yeah, if you're
Well,
interested, let us know.
If you like the book.
It's
Yeah.
best if you read the book.
Now, please. Now, I didn't see any place on the Pride Center's calendar for the Memento Rainbow Umbrella Coffee and Conversation. Is that sort of in
We
the...
met what was last month we
Yeah,
met? At
Red Hen.
Red
in
Hen,
Middlesex.
so I don't know if they're having one this month or not.
Well, I didn't see anything on the events page. And also last month, and thank you for announcing Charlie O's bar
Yeah.
takeover, there was a conversation that might become a monthly event. But again, I didn't see it listed. So
Yeah.
be checking back in with the events calendar because it looks as though it's continued to be updated, and that at the beginning of the month you may not necessarily see everything for the entire month. So, speaking of poetry readings and cultural events, the Shelburne Museum, and I don't know how I missed this, they currently have an exhibit of Luigi Lucioni. Sound familiar?
No.
An Italian-American immigrant pioneered the style of painting known as Yankee Modernism
Oh my goodness.
that incorporates New England folk art motifs, rural imagery, dramatic contrast of light and shadow. But what's unique about this is the first exhibit to really focus on his migrant and queer identities.
Oh, we'll have to get there.
This-
That's very
yeah.
interesting.
And the exhibit is on view until October 16th. And it's at the
Nice.
Pizza Galley Center
have
at
to go
the
for that.
Shelburne.
yeah.
It sort of came up as this sort of listserv thing, and I'm like,
Really?
so I may have to go. The other event coming up is on Saturday, October 1st, is the Outright Vermont Fire Truck Poll. If you are interested in supporting it, you can go on to their website. Out in the open, they're doing their Rural Summit.
I saw that.
And it's going to be October 15th and 16th in Halifax, Vermont. If that's of interest, go on to the Out in the Open website. I went on to try and get a sense of what were the workshops that were being offered. And unless you are actually registering,
You can't get
you
it.
can't get that
Okay.
level of detail. So,
I remember getting an invitation in the last couple of days because we went
Right.
one time.
So the other thing that's coming up that's of interest, and I'm saying this well in advance, is October 29th, 2 o'clock, but it's an in-person event in Brattleboro. And it's at the Brooks Memorial Library in Brattleboro. And it's a slideshow and storytelling presentation inspired by the lives and legacy of Warren Conmeyer and Leon Engel, Vermont couple who were entrepreneurs and civic leaders in Townsend, Vermont during the 1980s and 90s. Leon was a refugee twice, fleeing the Bolsheviks in 1918 and then again from the Nazis in the 1930s. So that should be, and what they're saying is Warren and Leon's remarkable story of love, adversity, caregiving, and creativity provides a lens to explore similar and divergent experiences of today's LGBTQ plus elders, asylum seekers, refugees, and immigrants. And as part of the presentation, there will be people there talking about the current pathway to citizenship, residency, immigration statuses, and how we invigorate underrepresented communities. So that was it for events. I wanted to do a few more cultural versus just, let's go hang
Sure.
out in a bar together, which will be ongoing.
Well, I'm really glad you told us about the
Shelburne.
yeah, that sounds very interesting. I love it there anyway. It's so
Yeah.
pretty. Okay, so to get back to Yeshiva University, we did this story before, and they took it to court. But as it turns out, the court cleared way for the LGBT group to be at the school. So they decided to close the whole thing down. So now nobody can have a group at all. So
So the school solution to an LGBTQ plus student group is we will not allow any student
Exactly.
no groups.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And let's see, what else do we have here? Oh yeah. So Texas, what?
Well, I was just going to add, if I may, we were listening to Gay USA, and Andy Helm was talking about how yeshiva, in this instance, is kind of, the emphasis is so religious that some of the basics of education are sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, widely overlooked.
Yeah.
He suggested. So
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it really. So let's see. Oh, we have Warren POTUS, a D.C. area-based. Oh, I'm sorry, we did that one. Sorry. About 100 youth activists and their supporters throughout the country turned out for a rally on Monday, September 12th, at D.C.'s John Marshall Park near U.S. Capitol to call on Congress to pass the LGBTQ non-discrimination legislation known as the Equality Act. At least a dozen participants who identified as LGBTQ college or high school students spoke at the rally, with several expressing concern that the Equality Act was stalled in the U.S. Senate by the Republican-led filibuster after being approved 2 times by the U.S. House during the past 2 years. A statement released by Advocates for Youth, a D.C. group that organized the rally, said the youth activists participating in the rally had mounted a letter-writing campaign ahead of the event in which more than 200 letters would be sent to the U.S. senators urging them to support the Equality Act. So
may I add one more thing?
yes?
I don't mean to keep taking your time. And quoting Gay USA again, but we watched it, and Ann Northrop, one of the co-hosts, had occasion to talk to Tammy Baldwin about the passage of the Equality Act, and she said that it looks good. There are like 4 or 5 Republicans who haven't come out publicly in support of it, but might be leaning toward it. So she was very
Yeah.
optimistic.
They need 10.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They need 60 votes,
Right.
however they get them.
Yeah?
Yeah.
More than likely, well,
Well, it's going to be deferred till after the election anyway.
yeah. The Disney-themed drag brunch scheduled for Sunday, September 11th, was abruptly canceled last week after an onslaught of threats of violence to the venue. The Cool Bean Bar and Grill, an LGBTQ-friendly establishment. The threats of violence came after social media posts by anti-LGBTQ users and far-right media outlet Blaze TV's host Sarah Gonzalez, who invited her viewers to join her in shutting down this event.
Disney's on the chopping block. I have more news about them.
Do you?
Well, that's an overstatement. It's under fire from right-wing groups.
A Brooklyn judge was removed from the borough's surrogate court last year after she allegedly made racist, homophobic, and xenophobic remarks directed at Hispanic people, according to the New York Daily News. In comments made in the presence of United Court System personnel, Judge Harriet Thompson allegedly derided gay men as Fs out to ruin me and try and get me. She also allegedly admitted that she assumed anyone with a Hispanic-sounding name was automatically a liar.
Oh,
I used to have a T-shirt that said, "That's Mr. Faggot to you."
They have a deceitful trait, she says, that goes way back to biblical times.
oh.
I know. The men are always stealing and the women are no better. They lie, steal, and use their vaginas for anything they want. Elsewhere in her alleged screen, Thompson left seemingly no group unscathed, coming after co-workers, fellow judges, women of multiple races and ethnicities, and another judge diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Thompson, who was removed from the bench in December, has since fought to get her job back, denied the allegation. It's about integrity and character. That's all I have, she told the paper. People lie, and people believe these lies.
But she's still out, right?
She's still out. Yeah, she's trying to get her job back. And at Brigham Young University, students and community members shielded LGBTQ students from protesters while they attended a back-to-school Pride Night event at a public park in Provo, Utah, Saturday evening by sporting angel wings that were they had these huge angel wings. Protesters directed anti-LGBTQ plus slurs at those attending Saturday's Pride celebration and held up signs that condemned a drag performance held at the event. BYU's honor code prohibits same-sex relations and does not permit LGBT plus student groups to meet on campus. A dozen people dressed as angels surrounded their LGBTQ peers and allies at a back-to-school Pride Night event Saturday in Provo, shielding them from a crowd of protesters that yelled anti-LGBTQ slurs and held up handmade signs quoting the Book of Mormon.
The angel circle is what we used to use with Phelps and the Topeka Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And I heard it originated with ACT UP.
Yes. Well, no, that's
Yeah.
who
Same.
did it.
And lastly, you remember the story about Children's Hospital in Boston
Oh, yeah.
getting a threat. Well, they have a 37-year-old Massachusetts woman, and she was arrested for allegedly making these threats, a bomb hoax threat to Children's Hospital. Catherine Levy was taken into custody at her home in Westfield. So they found her, she's been arrested, and it didn't say anything about what affiliation she might have had or why she did this, but there may be more news on that later, so we'll keep you informed.
I hope they throw the book at her.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to follow up on a story I did last time about the young man who was killed in Munster, Germany. More information has been revealed about that. But in addition, German soccer fans have rallied behind the slain hate crime victim. A week after the death of a trans man at the hands of a 20-year-old assailant. So when I reported on that last time, the assailants had fled and no one had been charged, but now they've caught this 20-year-old. Soccer fans in Germany rallied in support and mourning for the victim at a match in Bremen. The Bremen teen superfans, or ultras, unfurled massive banners at the 60-minute match reading "Queer Phobia Kills," and I have a picture before you now of this banner. In German, I won't pronounce, but you see it's in German, and that means "Queer Phobia Kills" and "Against All Transphobia. Rest in peace, Malta." And the 25-year-old Maltese, he's only identified by his last name, by his first name and initial, in keeping with privacy rules, died from injuries sustained on the Christopher Street Day Parade in Munster, the city's annual Pride March held the previous weekend. According to witnesses, he intervened when his attacker started hurling homophobic slurs at a group of women parade goers. He was struck twice in the face, fell to the ground, went into a coma, and never regained consciousness. Police apprehended the suspect at Munster Central train station based on photos and video provided by witnesses on the same day that Malta succumbed to his injuries. The suspect is being held in investigative detention on suspicion of bodily harm resulting in death. I would think so. Community leaders in the German city were shocked at the violent attack, and even the Roman Catholic bishop called it barbaric. Even. I have to say, it's my editorial comment, called it a barbaric and insane act. Intolerance, exclusion, and hatred must have no place in our society, he said in his statement. The Commissioner for Acceptance of Sexual and Gender Diversity said, "I'm stunned and sad. My condolences and deep sympathy go to his family and friends. Violence against queer people is a threat that we all must stand up to." This demonstration came just days after another violent attack on a trans person when 57-year-old a trans woman was assaulted on the tram in the same city. And I didn't know anything, I don't follow soccer really, but apparently soccer ultras have been outspoken in support of LGBTQ and trans rights. And there's a U.S. branch that acts in support of LGBTQ rights. Now let's talk about lesbian polar bears in Italy, if we may. A far-right...
Wait a minute. Polar bears in Italy?
I wish they were real, but actually they're on this children's series, Peppa Pig. So this far-right group in Italy is outraged over the popular children's cartoon that is from Britain, that it recently featured a lesbian polar bear couple. Federico Malaconi, cultural spokesperson for the Conservative Brothers of Italy party, declared that the nation cannot accept gender indoctrination and claimed that once again the politically correct has struck at the expense of our children. After 18 years, now I knew nothing about Peppa Pig also, but now audience can learn if you didn't know. After 18 years, Peppa Pig made waves last week for featuring its first LGBTQ couple. In its episode called Families, a character named Penny introduces her two moms. Yep. I live with my mummy and my other mummy. One mummy is a doctor and one mummy cooks spaghetti, Penny says. The episode came about in response to a petition to include a same-sex couple in the show that got almost 24,000 signatures. Now this right-winger is calling to ban the episode from all of Italy. A senator who is a member of this right-wing party called the episode gender propaganda and stated that the Brothers of Italy have long denounced any attempt at indoctrination by supporters of gender theories. Now, not surprisingly, Italian elections are coming up at the end of the month. This reminds me of DeSantis's business with the immigrants, although he's not running it imminently. Elections are coming up at the end of the month in Italy, and the anti-LGBTQ party, along with conservatives from other groups, are expected to easily win majority of both houses of parliament. The Brothers of Italy party leader is also expected to win the race for prime minister. Brothers of Italy, this group, played a large role in last year's defeat of the Zan bill, which would have classified anti-LGBTQ violence as a hate crime and increased anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ plus people. The bill was named for its sponsor, out-gay parliament member Alessandro Zan. In the wake of the party's anger over Peppa Pig, Zan mocked them in a tweet. Brothers of Italy raises the alarm. A new enemy is besieging the nation, Peppa Pig. So, On another, this is very fluffy story. I almost didn't include it, but it's got a nice picture.
But you're supposed to be our uplifting member, remember? So you need a fluffy story.
Now, do you have a clip? Because we're going to have to move on soon because Keith needs to finish his.
Okay, I'll just do some headlines. Queen Maxima of the Netherlands visits a gay bar. There's a picture of her. She went to the Castro. She visited a gay bar. The mayor was excited. She went to Twin Peaks Tavern. And the one point of interest, perhaps, is that in 2001, the Netherlands became the first country in the world to legalize gay marriage. So all was... a teacher in Ireland has been jailed. He refused to use gender. A student transitioned. He refused to use the they pronoun. He was disciplined and asked not to return to the classroom. He kept going to the classroom anyway. So now he's been taken to court and he's in jail because he won't, he says it's against his Christian beliefs to use gender-neutral pronouns. So I don't know what's going to happen about it.
It's against his Christian belief to honor a no trespass order?
Yeah, really. Okay, let's look at this clip from, it's called Will of the Wisp. It's from Portugal. At 67 minutes, this compact feature packs a lot of themes: climate change and environmentalism, male erotica and a gay love story, colonialism, privilege and duty, and musical numbers, including a dance sequence. Portugal has a deposed royal family whose successors are still called Prince. In 2011, young Prince Alfredo is taken by his father to the royal forest, where a love of tall trees is instilled. Sometime later, with forest fires caused by climate change in the news, Alfredo decides to become a firefighter. Volunteering with an ironically urban unit, he appears to skip boot camp, is assigned to a black firefighter for training, and they fall in love. So let's take a look at Will of the Wisp.
Rápido! Toca andar!
Cale-se, Maria Pia. Deixa o príncipe falar.
Senhores meus pais, eu quero ser bombeiro.
Por um dia, para aparecer nas revistas.
Não, senhora comandante.
Um príncipe, bombeiro. Mas veja lá se fica pelo menos até dezembro. É que se fizermos o calendário deste ano consigo, talvez já dê para mandar reparar o telhado.
Temos de fazer um teste a ver que tal és.
Tens que acertar o nome da obra do pintor.
Então, adivinhas?
Não.
Já viste que os grandes mestres não são contigo.
Tu vais-te dar, olha.
Olha que o gajo é príncipe. Comprime para aí à bruta. Ai, bandido, como empregaste?
Que devemos bem tratar, um amigo de verdade, tão fiel como a amizade, que podemos cultivar.
Com licença.
All right, where can we see this?
Well, on festivals in your area.
Okay. Keith?
We're having festivals.
Yes, and I want to put in a plug for New Fest, the New York Film Festival, that's airing in the middle of October. We'll
Okay.
talk more about that.
But talking about festivals, Sunday, the 18th, was the Vermont Pride Festival in Burlington. And despite the sporadic downpours, and it did downpour, they estimated there were over 5,000 people who marched. And
Was
the
that the
streets
biggest
were
ever?
lined.
Yes, I think so.
The biggest ever?
They're thinking that it's the largest march that they've had, and some of it may be due to, and as we were talking before we started, Clarence Thomas's opinion with, the Dobbs ruling and giving every indication of coming after us next. But some of it may actually have been in solidarity with the Pride Center. One of the backstories for this year's Pride is the Pride Center refused an $18,000 donation from Hannaford's. And Hannaford has been a primary sponsor for the last several Pride marches that have happened. All the Pride Center asked of Hannaford's is would they please meet with representatives from Migrant Justice about the Milk with Dignity program, which looks to how can we ensure that migrant workers are given the same protections as any other worker in Vermont. And Hannaford's didn't even respond. And it wasn't even a request that please sign on as a sponsor
But let's talk about it.
It's just, would you please meet with the representatives? Of interest, and this is where at times we kind of miss, the Pride Center got it right this time. HRC, their corporate index, they gave Hannaford's a 100% rating. How can you not be supporting migrant workers
And get 100%.
for inclusion and equity?
Yeah.
But another sort of backstory was one of the grand marshals was Alec Mapa, our Gaysian sweetheart. And they were amazing. They did a bit of stand-up at the rally, but then moved on to say, I want to talk about foster parenting and adoption of foster children. And he shared some statistics. There are approximately 2 million children currently being raised by LGBTQ parents. An estimated 14,000 foster children, or 3% of all foster children, currently live with LGBTQ plus foster parents. An estimated 105,000 LGBTQ are adoptive parents to a child under the age of 18, and we are more likely to adopt a child out of foster care over the age of 5. As they get older in foster care, they are less and less, desirable, adoptable. Research suggests that LGBTQ plus parents may be more willing than heterosexual parents to adopt children with special needs. Sound familiar? And same-sex couples are significantly more likely to live in a household with adopted children, stepchildren, and unrelated children. And as we had reported on a previous show, our Department of Children and Families are in the process now of providing training to and reaching out to and looking for foster parents. And we are indeed desirable foster parents looking at, what is the percentage of our homeless youth who are kicked out of their homes because of either sexual orientation, gender identity issues, and an unsupportive birth family. So also related to the Pride Center, Mike Bensel, the executive director, even though he was one of the founders 22 years ago and has worked at the Pride Center for the last 11 years, has tendered his resignation, or their resignation. They will be leaving at the end of this calendar year. There was no indication of what they have planned next or where they're moving on to, but on their website is Michael's statement, and you should go on and read it, where he talks about, how the organization and the community is so embedded in his heart, but that it's time to move on. And finally, this is a story I really like. The One Young World Foundation annual conference, 2,000 youth leaders from more than 196 countries. Wow. They come together, they talk about the issues in common. How can we be supportive? How can we learn each other? They do panels that are interactive. And in the midst of this year's meeting in Manchester, England, They gave Taylor Small Politician of the Year award.
Wasn't that fabulous?
As I'm choking up, they only gave out 5, and Taylor was the only one from North America.
Wow.
And it was for her work on the ban on gay, trans, panic defense.
That was so wonderful, that news.
And Taylor shared some at Pride Day what it was like being with this room filled with young activists. It's like there is a political movement coming after us. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of hope. And the conversation they had back and forth.
Wow.
So very quickly, the trivia, Barney Frank's classmate at Harvard, constitutional officer
From Newton, Massachusetts.
might have been Ed Flanagan, who was running for Auditor of Account. And Ed would then go on to also become the first openly LGBTQ plus member of the Vermont Senate. And Ed died in 1996. No, it was later than that, I'm sorry, 2006, from complications resulting from a car accident. Mm-hmm. So thank you to Ed for what you did. And he was, sat on boards of Outright, Vermont Cares, other organizations. So he not only was the face for, but was actively involved in creating support for our community.
Yes.
So
Wow.
with that, now that you're back,
I think we should always resist.